is Series 3 of Away, a podcast for anyone exploring 12-step sobriety. I'm your host, Steph Roberts. Hello, my friends. I hope everyone is doing really well and staying sober and finding some contentedness in this currently insane world. The Iowa caucus has mostly come to a conclusion, and my favorite candidate seems to be doing quite well. Bit of a dark horse. Speaks for moderation a little bit. Not that some of my ideals aren't very progressive, but I want someone who can win. Anyway. We are finally on step 12 in the 12 and 12. It is a massive chapter. We're not going to read the whole thing because, as ever with Mr. Wilson, it is very repetitive. And he delves into some topics that I think were his own issues more than they might necessarily be someone else's, even the other writers in the founding 100, whatever. And then after that, we'll move on to the 12 traditions, which I'm honestly a little more excited about, mostly because I don't get to do a lot on them. And there's some interesting history in there. Why they came about, how they came about, and hopefully I'll be able to make the traditions less groan-inducing. And then, if you learn something or you don't agree with me, whatever, you can go to meetings and kind of share about a tradition at a tradition meeting, or even be the speaker at a tradition meeting. But that's not till next week. So we'll finish up with step 12 and the 12 and 12 today. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So for the secularist, the atheist, the agnostic, the non-spiritual person, I would say step 12, having changed the way we think and look at the world, we continued to practice this new way of life and help others to do the same. Okay, first paragraph. The joy of living is the theme of AA's 12th step, and action is its key word. Here we turn outward toward our fellow alcoholics who are still in distress. Here we experience the kind of giving that asks no rewards. Here we begin to practice all 12 steps of the program in our daily lives so that we and those about us may find emotional sobriety. When the 12th step is seen in its full implication, it is really talking about the kind of love that has no price tag on it. So I agree. My husband once said something like, people always say the steps are the work, but really steps 1 through 11 are just the foundation for the work, and the work is step 12. That's where the real work, so to speak, begins. And I think that's true. In the past 11 steps, you've gotten yourself ready to be your best self. You've learned all the things you need to learn to draw upon your best self. And now you need to go out into the world as your best self. And not only that, but contribute to the world in real ways. One of the most important of those ways is helping others. Reading. Maybe there are as many definitions of spiritual awakening as there are people who have had them, but certainly each genuine one has something in common with all the others. And these things which they have in common are not too hard to understand. When a man or a woman has a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that he has now become able to do, feel, and believe that which he could not do before on his unaided strength and resources alone. So I think, in my opinion, the thing that we all have in common is change. And maybe I'm oversimplifying that, but I think that the quote-unquote miracle, if that's how you view it, is the fact that not only can you change, you have changed. By now, you have changed. Mind blown. For so many of us, I think change seemed impossible. We thought we would be stymied by our flaws and mistakes forever. And then bam, AA. The program has given us the tools that we never had or that we'd forgotten for living, and it's helped us rediscover the good within us, or maybe even find it for the first time. Spiritual or not, it's an awakening for almost everyone. For some of us, the strength we find to do this is partially from God. For some of us, it's partially from AA. For some of us, it's both of those things. For some of us, in the beginning, it's AA alone, nothing else. All right, skipping down on 107. What he, meaning you, me, us, what he has received is a free gift, and yet usually, at least in some small part, he has made himself ready to receive it. So I agree and I disagree. I think it's poorly worded. I don't love the gift word, because I think by this point in the steps, what you have now, if you've done the steps and stayed sober for a while, is something you worked for. So God may have provided strength. He may have given you the strength to receive the help you need, whatever, but you worked for it. You did it. So give yourself a pat on the back right now. Like, for real. And no one else may give you the pat on the back. And sometimes we need it, whether or not you believe in God. You know, and I think I've said this before in other podcasts, and this is like basic cognitive behavioral stuff. If you don't reward yourself for achievements, even in just a tiny way, acknowledge your achievement and your hard work, you're less likely to stick to any new habit, including not drinking. So a big part of success is taking just a second, not gloating, but taking just a second to be like, I'm damn proud of myself for that. So it's a gift maybe, but you earned it. Or you should have. All right, let's read. Step 1 showed us an amazing paradox. We found that we were totally unable to be rid of alcohol obsession until we first admitted that we were powerless over it. Could not restore ourselves to sanity, some higher power must necessarily do so if we were to survive. Consequently, that higher power can be AA. Consequently, in step 3, we turned our will and our lives over to the care of God or a higher power or AA as we understood it. For the time being, we who were atheist or agnostic discovered that our own group or AA as a whole would suffice as a higher power. Beginning with step 4, we commenced to search out the things in ourselves which had brought us to physical, moral, and spiritual bankruptcy. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory. Looking at step 5, we decided that an inventory taken alone wouldn't be enough. We knew we would have to quit the deadly business of living alone with our conflicts, and in honesty confide these to God and another human being. That's the most important part. At step 6, many of us balked for the practical reason that we did not wish to have all our defects of character removed, because we still loved some of them too much. I would say loved or depended or felt safe, right? We've talked about that. Yet we knew we had to make a settlement with the fundamental principle of step 6, so we decided that while we still had some flaws of character, which we always will, that we could not yet relinquish, we ought nevertheless to quit our stubborn, rebellious hanging on to them. We said to ourselves, this I cannot do today. Perhaps I can stop crying out, no, never. Then in step 7, we humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings, such as he could or would under the conditions of the day we asked. You know how I feel about that. In step 8, we continued our house cleaning, for we saw that we were not only in conflict with ourselves, but also with people and situations in the world in which we lived. We had to begin to make our peace, and so we listed the people we had harmed and became willing to set things right. We followed this up in step 9 by making direct amends to those concerned, except when it would injure them or other people. By this time, at step 10, we'd begun to get a basis for daily living. And we keenly realized that we would need to continue taking personal inventory, and that when we were in the wrong, we ought to admit it promptly. In step 11, we saw that if a higher power had restored us to sanity and had enabled us to live with some peace of mind in a sorely troubled world, then such a higher power was worth knowing better by as direct contact as possible. The persistent use of meditation and prayer, we found, did open the channel so that where there had been a trickle, there now was a river, which led to sure power and safe guidance from God as we were increasingly better able to understand him. So practicing these steps, we had a spiritual awakening about which finally there was no question. So I admit this is a good summary. Maybe the last bit could be rephrased and just say the persistent practice of meditation, reflection, whatever that looks like in your life, helped us to better see the ways in which we could change and even improve ourselves, and therein lay the awakening. I can always be changing. There's your way. I can always be changing. I can always be changing for the better. Those are my ABCs. Always be changing, parentheses, for the better. All right, hop down the page. Now, what about the rest of the 12th step, the wonderful energy it releases and the eager action by which it carries our message to the next suffering alcoholic, and which finally translates the 12 steps into action upon all our affairs is the payoff, the magnificent reality of Alcoholics Anonymous. Even the newest of newcomers finds undreamed rewards as he tries to help his brother alcoholic, the one who is even blinder than he. This is true. You have one day and someone has just come into her first meeting and she has 0 days. You still have a little bit more experience. You can still be of service to that person just by making them feel welcome and that they're not so alone in their fear. This is indeed the kind of giving that actually demands nothing. He does not expect his brother or sufferer to pay him or even love him. And then he discovers that by the divine paradox of this kind of giving, he has found his own reward. So I've always thought of and said that charity work is in many ways selfish, not selfish in the bad sense, and not necessarily consciously, but that feeling you get from helping others is really very, very good. It is or should be reward enough. And I know there are people who do charitable works because they feel obligated, and to them it feels like a chore. I mean, whatever, at least they're doing it. But I'm just not one of those people. It genuinely makes me feel good, and that's reward enough. Helping others does excite me, and it probably will you too. And it may very well when you were drinking or using too. I mean, there is a joy in being helpful to someone else. And the other selfish part of it is that it builds my own self-esteem, you know. Good works build good self-esteem. It can also often help me to better identify my own quote-unquote flaws. It's overall giving back and being of service in various ways is a win-win. Okay, we're going to move on because this chapter is long. Next page. Practically every AA member declares that no satisfaction has been deeper and no joy greater than in a 12th step job well done. To watch the eyes of men and women open with wonder as they move from darkness into light, to see their lives quickly fill with new purpose and meaning, to see whole families reassembled, to see the alcoholic outcast received back into his community in full citizenship. And above all, to watch these people awaken to the presence of a loving God. It's just as great even if they never awaken to a loving God. there is literally a change in a person's, not just their demeanor, their eye. Like there is a light that comes back. There is something that is dulled by drugs and alcohol that returns, and you may think that's spiritual. You may think it is the childlike spirit coming back. Whatever you believe or don't believe, it's there and it's obvious. And it is very fulfilling to see, even if you're not actively engaged in that particular person's recovery. It is just outstanding. Or, if you haven't been to a particular meeting in a long time, and there was a newcomer and you go back and the newcomer's got a year, like it's pretty cool to see the difference in the person. Okay. Nor is this the only kind of 12-step work. We sit in AA meetings and listen, not only to receive something ourselves, but to give the reassurance and support which our presence can bring. If our turn comes to speak in a meeting, we again try to carry AA's method. Whether our audience is one or many, it is still 12-step work. There are many opportunities, even for those of us who feel unable to speak at meetings, or who are so situated that we cannot do much face-to-face 12-step work. We can be the ones who take the unspectacular but important tasks that make good 12-step work possible. Perhaps arranging for the coffee and cake after the meetings, where so many skeptical, suspicious newcomers have found confidence and comfort in the laughter and talk. This is 12-step work in the very best sense of the word. So I've worked with plenty of people over the years who don't think they can do certain services, including speaking and sponsoring. And you'll hear some hardcore AAs say, you have to do it all, always say yes, blah, 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 blah. But this paragraph's kind of telling you don't. And I don't agree with those hardcore AAers. I think this paragraph is very important for that reason. If you're someone eaten away by intense anxiety and public speaking is terrifying, like really panic-inducing, then don't agree to be a speaker. It's okay. As you know, I'm totally in support of facing fears head on in order to get over them. But you absolutely do not have to stay sober. You don't have to speak. You don't have to sponsor. There's no one way. There's no one correct thing to do. Really, the requirement to stay sober is to face that one fear of living without alcohol a day at a time. And that fear gets easier and easier. That's your head on. Now, as life progresses, will you want to face some fears head on? Sure. Does it have to be public speaking? Absolutely not. Sponsoring, I'm a little murkier on, but it can be a very scary idea if you've had very low self-esteem your whole life. To think of guiding someone else through this stuff, it's nerve-wracking. But if you don't want to do that stuff, make the coffee. Make AA a welcoming place, so that the people who do want to sponsor and who do want to speak have a place to go to do those things that's comfortable and warm. I mean, my sponsor said service, especially in the beginning, just go introduce yourself to the newcomer, whoever raised her hand and said she had a day or 10 days or less time than you, whatever. Grand gestures in AA are no more meaningful than the small ones. Every gesture, every action, every service is as important as the next. If that weren't true, we wouldn't have a program. Find your niche. Try speaking. You hate it? Don't do it again. You can share one-on-one. I mean, just whatever. Don't let the annoying people get into your head. All right, next page. We may often pass through the 12-step experiences where we will seem to be temporarily off the beam. These will appear as big setbacks at the time, but will be seen later as stepping stones to better things. True. For example, we may set our hearts on getting a particular person sobered up, and after doing all we can for months, we see him relapse. Perhaps this will happen in a succession of cases. And we may be deeply discouraged as to our ability to carry AA's message. Or we may encounter the reverse situation in which we're highly elated because we seem to have been successful. Here, the temptation is to become rather possessive of these newcomers. Perhaps we try to give them advice about their affairs, which we aren't really competent to give or ought not to give at all. Remember, in AA, we only give advice, so to speak, on things we've experienced ourselves. That's the point, right? My life experience has shown me this, and therefore I can share it with you. I'm not a master of anything but my own experiences. Also related to this, excuse me. Okay, so also related to this paragraph, I'll say two things, or one thing. Watch out and watch out. Two meanings. As the helper, your sobriety cannot be wrapped up in someone else's. You do what you can, but you cannot control anyone. You're actually doing it all wrong if you're trying to control someone else. So watch yourself and your motives. But also, watch out for people who do this to you. Support is one thing. Stalking is another. And I'm not really joking. This is one of those areas I get annoyed with Bill and the writers. From the big book, you actually do have some instincts that are good. Not all your instincts were awry and bad, and you should listen to some of them. Like the one that's saying, this person is creepy and seems way too into me and my sobriety. That instinct, I mean, even if it's wrong, just listen to it. Better safe than sorry. A healthy mind, a healthy person with a healthy mind has healthy boundaries, naturally. Or has learned them in AA. But so your sponsor and supporters should know the proper boundaries. If you're uncomfortable, tell someone and try to extricate yourself. Feelings can get hurt. If this person is without boundaries, it's okay if you hurt feelings. Like it doesn't have to be mean, but their feelings should not be too hurt. That's part of all this. We are humans. Things don't always go perfectly in our relationships. Okay, next page. 112. Can we bring the same spirit of love and tolerance into our sometimes deranged family lives that we bring to our AA group? Can we have the same kind of confidence and faith in these people who have been infected and sometimes crippled by our own illness that we have in our sponsors? Can we actually carry the AA spirit into our daily work? Can we meet our newly recognized responsibilities in the world at large? And can we bring new purpose and devotion to the religion of our choice? Can we find a new joy of living and trying to do something about all these things? My answer, sure. Sure we can. Sure you can. You won't always. But if you're trying always, that's what's important. It's a practice. Life is a practice. There's no perfection. No matter what you believe in the afterlife, there's no such thing as perfect in this life. Why do you think all the religions have so many rules and so many things to aspire? There's no perfection. They go down the page. The AA answer to these questions about living is yes, all of these things are possible. Okay, next page, 113, middle paragraph. The best intentioned of us can fall for the two-step illusion. Sooner or later, the pink cloud stage wears off and things go disappointingly dull. We begin to think that AA doesn't pay off after all. We become puzzled and discouraged. So you know my feeling on part of this is like, I mean, if you have a mental health problem like I did with severe anxiety, mild depression, all of that, you're going to need to treat that. And not that a pink cloud will come back, but that excitement, now real life living without your medication kicks in, right? Your medication being alcohol or drugs, and now you've got life without it. So pink clouds disappear. I've seen some people talk a really good game of being on a pink cloud from day 1 to year 20. Do I believe them? I mean, not entirely. But if that's what gets them through the day, I just think it's unfortunate if they thump it a little bit, because that's not going to be everybody's experience. And, to get down about that, it's just not realistic. Like, life is hard sometimes, maybe a lot of the time. As my friend Bob always says, it's not all Skittles and blowjobs. AA does not, let me repeat, does not have all the answers. Really, it does not have all the answers, no matter what some starry-eyed thumpers, Jesus thumpers, may say. It does give you a new way of thinking. It has given you the most basic and most important tool you will ever need and use. And that, in my opinion, is the 1 day at a time tool. It might be 1 minute at a time. It might be one task at a time. It might be one small step in a task, one thing on the to-do list. But everything becomes more manageable when you take it one small goal at a time, one small step at a time. Next page. Our basic troubles are the same as everyone else's, but when an honest effort is made to practice these principles in all our affairs, well-grounded AAs seem to have the ability. Skip down. Like most people, we have found that we can't take our big lumps as they come, but also like others, we often discover a greater challenge in the lesser and more continuous problems of life. Our answer is in still more spiritual development. Only by this means can we improve our chances for really happy and useful living. So, I think my experience is that a part of happy life is being useful. I don't disagree with that. But I do think that looks different in different people's lives. The context of your life matters. So if you're a single mom with a full-time job, you're already probably really fucking useful to your kids and your boss. And maybe you don't, literally don't have the time to be useful anywhere else, to do service at meetings. And the people who say, well, you made time to drink, oh my God, yes, you did. But maybe you made that time when everyone was asleep. Maybe you drank from, 7 p.m. till you passed out. So maybe, depending on the context of your life, you don't have time to be of service or useful to AA in the way that some people think you should be. Whatever. We just read showing up at a meeting is useful. Calling a newcomer when you have a moment is useful. So, again, it doesn't have to be the grand gestures. As your life clears up, you will find you have more time to be useful in all different areas. But what you can do right now, in my opinion, is just step up in your own life, right? Be more useful in the areas that you already have the time for. So be the best employee you can be. Be the best mom you can be. That doesn't mean being nice all the time and not getting annoyed, right? But just bring that usefulness into the things that are already there. Bring that new clear-headedness into your job, into your parenting. Show up on time. Make time to read to the kids. And then also find out what you need to do for you. So that may mean going to meetings. That may mean being of service in the AA community. And that may also mean taking a nap, right? But, okay. Useful to you and others. Okay, I'm skipping the next page. Blah, 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 blah. 116. It became clear that if we ever were to feel emotionally secure among grown-up people, we would have to put our lives on a give-and-take basis. We would have to develop the sense of being in partnership or brotherhood with all those around us. We saw that we would need to give constantly of ourselves without demands for repayment. I mean, yes and no. Yes, good relationships are equal and require an equal amount of give and take, generally speaking. No, we don't have to constantly be giving and never expect anything. That's not actually how relationships work. I think in the rooms, we give without expectation. And we're met with more than we ever could have hoped for. But, this is context matters again. Reading. When we developed still more, we discovered the best possible source of emotional stability to be God himself. We found that dependence upon his perfect justice, forgiveness, and love was healthy, and that it would work where nothing else would. Okay, or in my case, it was sobriety, Lexapro, and occasionally a good drink. And as we kind of talked about in the last episode, this also depends a lot on whether your God or your conception of your higher power is omniscient or omnipotent. All-knowing or everything. Knows and does. That's and whatever. That's a big question. Okay. 117. Most married folks in AA have very happy homes. To a surprising extent, AA has offset the damage to family life brought about by years of alcoholism. But just like all other societies, we do have sex and marital problems. And sometimes they are distressingly acute, Bill. Permanent marriage breakups and separations, however, are unusual in AA. Our main problem is not how we are to stay married, it is how to be more happily married by eliminating the severe emotional twists that have so often stemmed from alcoholism. Okay, like we said in every Big Book episode, history matters, context of time. This may be true for you, may not. My general rule is not to take marital advice from someone who cheated on his wife for his whole life, his whole marriage. So, let's skip right over this bullshit. It seems like it's Bill working through his own demons on the page yet again. So in the footnote on 118, it says, in adapted form, the steps are also used by Al-Anon family groups. Not a part of AA, this worldwide fellowship consists of spouses and other relatives or friends of alcoholics in AA or still drinking. Al-Anon's a great program. As an alcoholic, my opinion is don't be lazy. Go to an Al-Anon meeting to listen. That's another way to better yourself because you're trying to understand other people's perspectives. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that. Okay, 119, all the way down. We're talking about love and marriage. It is only where boy meets girl on AA campus and love follows at first sight that difficulties may develop. The prospective partners need to be solid AAs and long enough acquainted to know that their compatibility at spiritual, mental, and emotional levels is a fact and not wishful thinking. That's a great little paragraph. Healthy people attract healthy people and the reverse. So if you're new, you're probably not really that healthy yet. And if someone with time is picking you up, that's not someone healthy. You'll be amazed at who you attract when you get more spiritually fit, emotionally fit, whatever you want to say. So, wait a little before choosing a mate. My own experience in watching others is that if you're very early in sobriety, you're probably not madly in love with that other person. You're probably still looking for something else to fix you. Is that normal for us? Yeah. Is that healthy? Probably not. Page 120. Where the possession of money and material things was concerned, our outlook underwent some revolutionary change. With a few exceptions, all of us had been spendthrifts. We threw money about in every direction with the purpose of pleasing ourselves and impressing other people. Excellent paragraph, if this holds true for you. And if it wasn't about the material, maybe it was about your attitude. Maybe that's something to consider. What did I do to make myself seem bigger, better, healthier than I was? What did I do to hide the quote-unquote real me, the one I was ashamed of back then? Okay, next page. Upon entering AA, these attitudes were sharply reversed, often going much too far in the opposite direction. The spectacle of years of waste threw us into panic. There simply wouldn't be time, we thought, to rebuild our shattered fortunes. Okay, whether it's fortunes or just lost time, panic won't help you. It's not that easy for me to say and you to stop, but it won't. You can't get the lost money, the lost time back. Let's just keep it real, right? We're here now. So, step 12, the question is, how do I continue to lead a life in which these things won't happen again? That's all you got now. Okay, bottom of the page. But as time passed, we found that with the help of AA's 12 steps, we could lose those fears no matter what our material prospects were. We would cheerfully perform humble labor without worrying about tomorrow. If our circumstances happened to be good, we no longer dreaded a change for the worse. It did not matter too much what our material condition was, but it did matter what our spiritual condition was. Money gradually became our servant and not our master. I mean, nice for some, but really, context of time and privilege is important here, right? Most of these men were not literally impoverished. They were older white men in 1939. They had gone through the Depression, but I don't think they knew really what it meant to be a part of the disenfranchised in this country, any more than they knew what it meant to be a single mom with mouths to feed. So I would say in reality, these fears do not magically disappear. They become manageable. It is right to worry about your next paycheck, especially if you have rent to pay. It is right to worry about your retirement, especially in the current climate where we don't know what's going to happen to our Social Security. It's not right to do nothing about it, but worry. The minute you take an action to help yourself, like getting a job, yes, even a job that seems beneath you, you start to feel less panic and more hope, at least in my experience. That doesn't mean the fear goes away. That's very real, and we live in a capitalist republic where it matters. So I think it's not going to go away. It just may not be panic anymore, and you'll break it down into small, manageable chunks, and it can resolve. When AA was quite young, a number of eminent psychologists and doctors made an exhaustive study of a good-sized group of so-called problem drinkers. These doctors weren't trying to find how different we were from one another. They sought to find whatever personality traits, if any, this group of alcoholics had in common. They finally came up with a conclusion that shocked the AA members of that time. These distinguished men had the nerve to say that most of the alcoholics under investigation were still childish, emotionally sensitive, and grandiose. So yeah, accept it. We were at least behaving like teenagers, right? Selfish and sensitive, and you hear a lot of people in the room say our emotional growth was stunted when we started drinking, and it's true for many of us. That does not mean it manifested in every facet of your life all the time, right? But an aspect. By now, we've worked on letting that go so that we can make our way through the world as proper adults who other people would actually like to get to know or even maybe aspire to be like one day. Responsible, kind, unselfish adults. Oh, this is an exhausting chapter. Okay. Page 124, further down the page. Still more wonderful is the feeling that we do not have to be specially distinguished among our fellows in order to be useful and profoundly happy. Not many of us can be leaders of prominence, nor do we wish to be. Service gladly rendered, obligations squarely met, troubles well accepted. This is true. For many of us, just not feeling different from or unique is like the best thing ever. Take a minute at the next meeting, just listen and consider the people there who do still obviously need to stand out. Maybe, just hypothetically, they insist upon introducing themselves differently from everyone. Like, hi, I'm Kendra, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. They got to stand out, right? There has to be some way they're better than, different from. They have to distinguish themselves from everybody else. They know more. Do you want to be that person who so clearly still needs to distinguish herself from everyone else? Maybe this is the one place you shouldn't. Maybe this is the safe space. Just a thought. Okay, last page. These little studies of AA 12 steps now come to a close. We have been considering so many problems that it may appear that AA consists mainly of racking dilemmas and troubleshooting. To a certain extent, that is true. We've been talking about problems because we are problem people who have found a way up and out and who wish to share our knowledge of that way with all who can use it. For it is only by accepting and solving our problems that we can begin to get right with ourselves and with the world. I mean, we're a problem people. Everybody's a problem people, just different problems. But that last sentence, for it is only by accepting and solving our problems that we can begin to get right with ourselves and with the world. It's also the only way we can do step 12 and help others, because just sharing your experience of drunken days isn't enough. You need to experience sober life, real life. Then you have something real and important to give back or give away. We make others feel welcome by sharing our drunkalogs, but we help them by sharing our real sober life experiences. On that note, we're going to finish the 12 steps part of the 12 and 12. Next up, as I said in the beginning, the traditions. I promised to make them a little bit more fun than they seem right now. I don't know if I was all over the place tonight. Regardless, I hope it helped someone. I hope it helped you. I hope it helped to remind you that there are a lot of ways to get sober. There isn't only one way, but I promise there is a way.